It's Wednesday, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome to our special edition of Together Unlocked, commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day. The show is brought to you, as always, by Together 2012. We're a disability arts organisation led by disabled artists and based in the main London 2012 host borough of Newham. We're working to create a lasting Paralympic cultural legacy with the ongoing support of Arts Council England and National Lottery Community Fund. I'm Ju Gosling, also known as Ju90. I'm an artist and artistic director of Together 2012 CIC. I'm a white woman with pale olive skin and hennaed hair in a self-styled corona crop. I have green eyes behind black plastic glasses and also have black wrist braces and silver coloured jewellery. Today, I'm wearing a white t-shirt from Regard, the national LGBTQI plus disabled people's organisation, which has a rainbow wheelchair user symbol on an upside down pink triangle. I also have a lavender coloured cardigan with a pink and mauve diamond pattern on. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our special guest, Rachel Century from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, who's going to tell us more about the day, why it's so important, and how we can join in from home in 2021. Then, thanks to the great generosity of artist Liz Crow of Roaring Girl Productions, we're going to show her 2008 short film, Resistance. In 1933, the Nazis began a program of institutionalizing and forcibly sterilizing disabled people. In 1939, by which time 360,000 disabled people had been forcibly sterilized, the T4 euthanasia program was launched. And by 1945, 250,000 disabled people of all ages and from all impairment groups had been murdered. The film Resistance is set at the beginning of the T4 programme in 1939. After we've seen Resistance, myself and my co hosts will be giving our personal responses to Holocaust Memorial Day. Josh Surgener, our young producer, reflects on his visit to Auschwitz as a teenager. Our chair, Julie Newman, and our social media lead, Renee Wallen, join me to discuss our responses as gay and Jewish people. And then we finish with a song from Robin Surgener, also known as Angry Fish, and also our business director. It's important to acknowledge here that the show does not represent the Together 2012 community as a whole. There are no contributions from people of colour, Polish people, Roma people, nor does it cover later genocides which many of our neighbours have experienced. We intend to expand our activities next year, but in the meantime, please do visit the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust website for more information. You will find the link on our highlights and links page, which is under the main Together Unlocked TV page on our website, www.together2012.org.uk. So, welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. I'll start with a little audio description, which I'm not used to doing, but I think it's a fantastic idea. So thank you for encouraging me. I'm white with blue eyes and curly hair, which is about up to my shoulders at the moment, slightly messy, so apologies. I'm wearing a white blouse with black butterflies and a sort of black jumper over it. I'm sitting in front of a Holocaust Memorial Day Trust banner, which has got our flame logo on it, which is a purple flame. I'm also wearing one of our pin badges, but I think I'm not sitting in the right position for your camera to pick it up. There you go. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today.
Well, it's great to have you with us. What's the background? Let's start. What's the background to Holocaust Memorial Day?
So Holocaust Memorial Day itself started in the year 2000. Governments from 46 different countries met in Stockholm to discuss Holocaust education, Holocaust remembrance. And at the end of their time in Stockholm, these 46 countries signed what became known as the Stockholm Declaration, which was their commitment to furthering Holocaust education, Holocaust research, Holocaust commemoration in their own country. And each of those 46 countries took ownership of how it would be marked in their own country. So every country does it differently. In the UK, Holocaust Memorial Day took the form of a ceremony, an official ceremony that took place every year on the 27th of January, which is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz Birkenau, which is the largest Nazi concentration camp complex. And that happened from the year 2000 until 2005, and the day was organised by the Home Office. And then in 2005, it got too big, and they decided to set up us, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, to run the day for them. And the first Holocaust Memorial Day that the Trust ran was the Holocaust Memorial Day 2006. Now, as well as doing the ceremony, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust also supports and helps promote Holocaust Memorial Day around the country to local activity organisers. We want everybody to mark Holocaust Memorial Day by hosting their own event. And we've seen this grow and grow over the years. In 2006, so the first Holocaust Memorial Day that the Trust was responsible for, there were 266 activities around the whole country. Last year, for Holocaust Memorial Day 2020, which was the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, there were 17,000 activities around the whole country. So the growth is just phenomenal. And these activities took place in libraries, in cinemas, in prisons, in schools, in arts groups, in faith groups, in local authorities. There's no reason for any group to not mark Holocaust Memorial Day. It's an opportunity for the group or the organisation to come together, to remember the victims and honour the survivors of the Holocaust, but also Nazi persecution, and of subsequent genocides which have happened since in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. And this year it's going to be a little bit different because of the pandemic.
Yes, I was just going to come in and say what we did last year because, one hopes that by next year these systems will be coming back again. What we were able to do really easily was just go onto the website, order posters, order leaflets, order badges, all of it was free. We then covered the community cafe with it at St Bart's Community Centre where we were based, and everybody was able to see it, read about it, and it was just so straightforward and easy to do.
Well, thank you so much for saying so. We really try to make it as easy as possible for everybody to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. And we produce a range of resources, all of which are free, to make sure that everybody can mark the day. And this year, we had to be a bit more creative. The resources you mentioned are still available, but we realised that people aren't going to order the physical leaflets to distribute to their members or their peers. And we've come up with different resources this year to enable people to gather together virtually and digitally to still mark the day. And these resources are very different, they're a bit more creative, and some of them are based on what we know people did in previous years. So, for example, we know that lots of people gather together and talk about a film. And I think that's what you're doing this year as well. And by talking about a film last year in a cinema, maybe, we can't do that this year, but we could still all watch the same film, perhaps independently or together on a platform such as Zoom or Teams, and then we can still discuss the film. So we've produced a resource to help leaders, activity organisers go through what they might discuss, which films might be appropriate, and to try and give some ideas and suggestions. So we
Yes, in fact, last Friday, because on our Friday show we have a theme. I'll start that again. Last Friday, we have a spot called Something for the Weekend, and we recommend things that people can do online and offline at home. And there was a film, and then we put the links into our highlights and links page. And there was a group that were going to watch Sophie's Choice. And it was really good because you had a link to watch it for free on YouTube, not very good quality, and another link to watch it if you paid a little bit for it on Prime. And then there was the Zoom link for everybody to get together and discuss it afterwards. So that's the kind of, that was actually being organised from the US, but that was also great because it meant we could promote that to people to join in with from the UK.
And so, one thing that's really exciting for me about this year is in previous years, we've seen people come together with their local community, people that live close to them, or, this year, there's no limit. If you're using Zoom, you can open your platform to people all over the country. We have on our website a list of all the activities taking place that we know about. In previous years, I would have said to you, oh, why don't you look and see what's happening in the local area and join? This year, you can have a look at what's happening around the whole country and see if there's any events that are open to the public that you fancy, that you think would be interesting if you want to watch a particular film and discuss it, for example, or there are other creative events as well.
That sounds fantastic. What are some of the themes of Holocaust Memorial Day?
So every year we choose a new theme for Holocaust Memorial Day. There's a few reasons for that. One is we know there are people that mark the day every single year. We want to give them a new theme, a new angle to look at. Maybe they'll discover a new story or find out more. Keeps it fresh and interesting. But also, we find that a new theme is a way of engaging people that maybe haven't come to Holocaust Memorial Day events before if they think it's not for them, but the theme draws them in. So the theme for Holocaust Memorial Day 2021 is Be the Light in the Darkness. And we actually chose the theme a long time ago. We chose it because it relates to the Holocaust, to Nazi persecution, and the subsequent genocides. In all of those cases, you can find examples of individuals, of groups being the light in the darkness, sometimes speaking up for their peers who were being persecuted, maybe taking action, rescuing, or resisted. And it felt like the theme fitted really well. And then COVID happened, the pandemic started, and we realized that the theme also fits really well with today's times. It feels like we are going through a period of darkness, yet we have seen some incredible examples of lights. We've seen community groups come together, we've seen food banks being set up, we've seen certain individuals speaking out and supporting one another. And so it wasn't planned, but the theme does fit well. And then we're actually taking this one step further, and we're asking everybody to be the light physically. We're asking people to safely place a lit candle in your window at 8 p.m. on the 27th of January. And we hope that people all around the country will take part in this action. They'll come together, it'll be a visible sign in everybody's window, and we will use the candles to remember the people that were murdered for who they were. And we will show that we are standing up against hate crimes, against identity based violence as one. So,
And I think that's just such a powerful message. As I believe I said on Monday's show, we always promote battery operated candles, and I have a battery operated candle waiting already. Did you have, we've got a couple of minutes. I just wondered if there's anything else that you'd like us to take away in particular this year.
thank you for asking that question. It's a really important one. So, everybody is invited to watch the ceremony with us. It is going to be streamed at 7 p.m. on the 27th of January. It's the first time ever that the ceremony has been pre-recorded and is digitally available. So that's going out at 7 p.m. on the 27th, and all the details are on our website, which is hmd.org.uk. And then we're asking people to light a candle, and I think battery operated is a great option. Thank you for mentioning that, at 8 p.m. What I would really like is, I think, for anybody to take one step further on their own journey. So, for people for whom this is a new subject, taking the time to watch the ceremony and light a candle is the first step. But for people maybe that have been to previous ceremonies or previous events, we hope that you will do something more. You can read more about any of the genocides I've mentioned on our website. You can raise awareness. The more people that find out about it, only good can come of that. Ultimately, we want people to be organising their own HMD event, as you are doing, and maybe somebody that lights a candle this year will be holding their own event next year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rachel. I mean, like you say, we're on our own journey. Last year, we simply took your wonderful leaflets and posters and distributed them. This year, we have a special show. Next year, I very much hope we will be organising a physical event. That would be nice, but if not a physical event, then a bigger event and a more detailed event, because there's just so much information and so much to take in. But yeah, it's never been more important, has it, to be a light in the darkness. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
Grey bus pulls away. A young clerk, a pile of documents in her arms, walks from the bus to a large grey stoned building. Elise, a patient, sweeps the forecourt, follows some distance behind. Resistance. The institution's front hall. The clerk passes through a wooden door. Just outside, Elise sweeps, listening intently.
Good morning, Herr Doctor.
Ah, Wallen. Come in, come in.
An office, wood-panelled walls, a large desk at the centre. The institution's medical director sits at the desk. The clerk places her documents before him.
What happens next?
Letters to the relatives in a couple of weeks. Probably put it down to pneumonia.
Will the families want to visit?
Yes, a few might, but they'll be told the place is quarantined. It's easier that way, as long as there are no gaffes.
Gaffes?
Well, there was the Schmidt woman. We had her son, a desperate young man. The letter said his appendix ruptured, but it was removed when he was 2. The mother was furious. She worked the whole thing out. It wasn't so much that he'd been selected, just she felt she should have been let in on the secret.
Outside the door, Elise continues to eavesdrop. Elise sweeps tight to the edges of a day room, eyes darting, patients pale and lethargic. At a large table sit Amelie and Berta.
We'll have fresh baked bread.
The finest silverware.
Oh, and little finger bowls.
A cheese board.
Bavarian blue. And Viennese coffee.
Gingerbread men.
Pretzels.
Apple strudel with cream.
Thomas crouches at the table between the 2 women.
My teacher lived with us for a while he was waiting to reach Sweden. He loved to cook.
Elise hides her sweepings from view.
Regelach, and pancakes, and challah bread.
Buttercream tort with marzipan in layers.
Picks up breadcrumbs.
Red fruit pudding.
Eats furtively.
I used to pick red currants with my little girl.
Thomas kisses her lightly on the top of her head. Door opened. The patients scramble. Thomas knocks the broom from Elise's hands. An orderly carries a large tureen to the table. Elise sits warily. The orderly slops thin soup into bowls. Absorbed in eating, Otto knocks a pile of his drawings to the floor. Images of a syringe, a large dark bus. Elise gulps soup from a bowl. Evening. The staff room comfortable and warm. Alcohol and sweetmeats in plenty. Staff mingle, well-fed, ordinary looking. A framed photograph of a young man gives way to a reflected portrait of the medical director. He crosses the room, leaning on a walking stick. Sets his glass on a table.
Colleagues, I look around me tonight and I see ordinary men and women of Germany pulling together to accomplish an extraordinary task. What we practice here, you and I, is a tidy resolution to disease. When the sick bird falls to the cat or the weak hare is caught by the fox, it is the law of natural selection.
The staff nod.
And here, it falls to us to help that law along.
The nurse is uneasy.
Ours is a noble duty. In ending their suffering, we make a better world for us all. So it is with some pride I've asked you to gather here. Because today, from our institution alone, we reached our 1,000th dispatch.
Gestures to the photograph of the young
If
man.
we all have a glass. A noble duty and a better world.
They stand. Raise glasses.
The Führer.
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 A dormitory. Beds tightly packed, people curled and hunched under thin blankets, moonlight on the walls. Berta is in the bed next to Elise.
Elise. Now they've taken Benedict. What do we do?
Elise turns to the wall.
We go.
Back at the staff party, the orderly twists the neck of his shirt to make a clerical collar. The staff turn expectantly.
We are gathered here to mark the demise of our dear departed Benedict Berg.
He clutches the photograph of Benedict to his chest.
A mountain of a man who has fallen from the final precipice.
The photograph is knocked to the table.
He died as he lived, smelling vaguely of gas. And although useless in life, he was useful in death. He had a lot of gold fillings.
The medical director approaches.
Enough. Does a farmer mock his cattle when they are slaughtered?
Daytime, medical director and clerk enter the dormitory.
Right.
Patients assembled on their beds, unease palpable.
Yes.
Clark points at patients in turn. Gertrude, Herman.
Hold him over.
Bedwetters have to stay behind.
No, keep him on the list.
Medical director turns to Amelie, who is blind.
Yes.
Me? Did he pick me? Thomas?
Thomas, agonised, barely
Yes.
registers his own selection.
Yes.
Hannah. Greta. Elise.
Yes.
Gives no emotion away. Otto. His face crumples. Dieter. Erna looks directly at the medical director. Smiles.
Is she useful, nurse?
Oh, she helps with the other patients.
Hold her over then.
Well, who should you have instead?
Glances round.
She can go.
Nods at Sophie. The nurse, stunned. Sophie clings to her.
That's the list.
Thank you. Good morning, nurse.
Medical director and Clark leave. Berta has escaped selection. There is no one to celebrate with. Amelie winds a satin ribbon around her fingers.
Now, tomorrow, those of you who've been chosen will be going on an outing.
Liar. You're just jealous because you're not going.
Now then, come on, we've got a lot to do. All those of you who are going, start to gather your things together.
Elise stands with her broom, agitated. The warm glow of evening. Elise opens the front door, slips surreptitiously out to the forecourt, checks she is unseen, hides her broom amongst leaves, swift, deliberate, turns back, unbalanced without the broom. "30 feet from the institution doors is a grey bus, smoked windows, door open, suitcases loaded. Clark hands a stack of documents to an SS nurse. He signs a release paper. Patients emerge onto the forecourt, led to the bus. Gertrude shrinks back.
I don't want to go.
Pushed forward.
I don't want to go. No.
Sophie clings to the nurse.
I don't want to go.
Pulled away to the bus. Patients emerge in steady stream. The nurse looks on to chaos, bewildered. Amelie and Thomas hold together tightly. Herman's letters fall in the chaos. He tries to retrieve them, forced to the bus. Amelie and Thomas wrenched apart and boarded. Otto is rushed towards the bus. Elise emerges from the door, eyes darting. Otto runs from the line, lumberingly. Elise sidles down the ramp to retrieve her broom. SS nurses catch Otto easily. Wrestle to the ground, sedated. Elise, broom in hand, turns, face to face with the nurse, both rooted with fear. Nurse takes Elise's shoulder, tears the label from her back, pushes her. Go! Otto is carried unconscious onto the bus. Elise sweeps, desperately, urgently. A last glance. A backdrop of greenery as she heads for freedom. She sweeps for her life. And is gone. A path of resistance behind her. Main cast: the inmates, Elise, Lou Burks, Erna, Ali Briggs, Otto, Jamie Bedard, Berta, Sophie Weaver, Amelie, Oriel Britton, Sophie, Pauline Heath, Gertrude, Yvonne Lynch, Thomas, Matt Fraser. The staff: Clark, Chloe Lucas, Medical Director, David Collins, Orderly, Canis Bannon, Nurse, Sarah Buckland. Audio description by Liz Crow. Composers Claudio Arles and Barnaby Taylor. Director of Photography and Editor Terry Flaxton. Post-production facilities The Engine Room. Produced by Lou Burks. Written and directed by Liz Crow. Roaring Girl Productions. roaring-girl.com 2008.
In the summer of 2011, I would have been aged 15 or 16. During that summer, a group of friends and I travelled to Poland as part of a trip with the Scouts. It was a 2-week trip, 2.5-week trip, and we travelled all over Poland. However, during that trip, I visited the Auschwitz Museum and Memorial. The experience was difficult. It was emotional. And the feeling that I got from being at the camp was something I'd never experienced before. It's a feeling that I wouldn't be able to accurately describe for another 5 years until I visited New York. During the trip, when we visited the memorial and went on the tour, it it really brought to life the horrors that occurred. I was aware of the history. I'd studied it in school. But it wasn't until I was actually there and saw the exhibits of the piles of shoes that had been collected after the camp was liberated, the clothes worn by people as a disabled person, the piles of prosthetic limbs and crutches from people that have been executed. But my biggest feeling was of strangeness. The air was thick, it was heavy. There was something about being there that felt wrong. And I wouldn't be able to accurately describe that feeling, as I said, for 5 years. When I travelled to New York in 2016, I visited the Ground Zero Memorial with friends that are from New York. And it was there that I felt the same feeling that I'd had in Auschwitz in 2011. And it was then, at the age of 21, that I was able to actually understand what that feeling was. It was a feeling of intrusion, a feeling of invasion, that where I wasn't for me, that where I was an incredibly significant and important memorial, and that it had to be there for the history, and it had to be there for those people that are directly connected to those events. But for me, as a person visiting the memorial as a tourist, albeit a very mindful tourist, but a tourist, it felt wrong for me to be there. And I don't think that feeling will ever change. And it's something that's really difficult to put into words, quite how powerful of a place the Auschwitz Memorial is. The museum and the exhibits and the galleries that highlight what went on, but actually being there and walking the roads of the camp, walking, inside the buildings, is you feel the historical significance, you feel the weight of what happened there. And it really brings home the horror of those events.
So, back in our East London studio, Julie and I are joined from Essex by our social media lead, Renee Wallen. And we often see Renee's posts around the Unlocked show, but I don't think we've actually had Renee on the show in person. So welcome, Renee.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me along today.
So Holocaust Memorial Day, we're looking at it as the way it impacts on us, looking back, but also very much looking to the present and how it's affecting the present. And not just how we're responding to Holocaust Memorial Day and remembering it, but what that means for our wider community. As gay people, we're very conscious of the fact that so many people died during the Holocaust. But obviously, the group who were persecuted beyond any other group were the Jewish people.
So 6 million Jewish people died during that period, horrendously. And I can only imagine that a lot of them, or certainly a great number of them, may have been related to me. So if I may tell you a personal story, I had a cousin called Harry. He was actually my grandmother's cousin, so a first cousin once removed. I don't know if you'll be able to see this clearly.
Yes, we can.
Harry was a very small boy, and he remembered walking out of Poland holding his mother's hand, just literally leaving their village. So this year marks the 50th anniversary of the film Fiddler on the Roof, which is a very poignant film, very traditional. It's fun because it's a musical, but it has a very, very strong message. And at the end, the villagers have to leave their homes. And Harry remembered that from being a tiny, tiny boy. I met Harry when I was 15. I remember him as a happy, smiling man who taught me to swim, actually. And he bought me my first strawberry daiquiri. They're my memories of him. But my mum's memory is the story he told about leaving Poland. And she cries every time she watches Fiddler on the Roof because she thinks of her cousin and the other cousins who weren't lucky enough to leave. Now, Harry's daughter, Adrian, I'm very, very close to. And after her parents had both passed away, she was going through her mother's belongings. And she found a package of letters that Harry had written during the war. And it turned out he'd never spoken about it. He was one of the first soldiers that had gone in to liberate Auschwitz. And he'd written home of the horrors he'd seen. Never spoke about it after the war, but Adrian's mum, Dorothy, had saved those letters. And they are now in the Washington Holocaust Memorial Museum. So I'm very proud that we've got a family legacy there.
And like you say...
And that's the most personal story I can tell you of my relationship to the Holocaust.
Yes, and like you say, there'll be other stories that are unknown because those people have died. I've been doing a lot of family history research over the last 18 months, and I just can't imagine how appalling it must be to see so many family lines just come to a halt. In terms of what happened to gay people, I'm going to consult the very excellent Holocaust Memorial Day website, which we will be having, of course, on our highlights and links page. And one of the things it points out is that Germany originally was one of the most liberal places to be as a gay person, certainly as a gay man. I think lesbians were not so recognised and therefore perhaps were able to kind of, yes, perhaps get away with a little bit more. If you're invisible, it's hard to attract attention. But in 1929, by 1929, they were completely decriminalising homosexuality. And yet all of that changed with the Nazis. They established lists, and again, I think using the sort of nightclubs and nightlife against people, and presumably with a lot of very aggressive questioning and torture, they established a list of about 50,000 men who received very, very severe jail sentences. 10 to 15,000 were deported to concentration camps, most of whom then died. Many were castrated, according to the site. Some were subjected to gruesome medical experiments. There were collective murder actions taken against gay detainees where they killed hundreds and hundreds of people at a time. They didn't include lesbians in that legislation, but Austria did. And I think what's really shocking is that after the war, the Allies chose not to remove the legislation that the Nazis had put in. They didn't recognise gay prisoners as victims of the Nazis, and that was a status that was essential to qualify for reparations. So the gay victims of the Nazis were just seen as criminals. They were denied all of those things. And in fact, they think many actually stayed in the prisons because, again, they were seen as criminals. And one of the things that really resonates with me today is what's happening to gay refugees from Uganda as they come into Kenya, because Kenya criminalizes homosexuality, gay refugees are being criminalized, and then they're denied refugee status, they're denied access to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. So it's just one of the many ways I think that you can see what's happening to us today, kind of going back to those roots. I think the thing that really, of course, hits all of us is the fact that so many disabled people are dying at the moment as a result of COVID. And yet, oh, well, they had an underlying health condition that somehow, if you have diabetes or high blood pressure, let alone cerebral palsy, that somehow your life is less valuable. And so much of that comes from the sort of Holocaust years, the Nazi years. But one of the things you were pointing out earlier, weren't you, Julie, was the forced sterilisation that took place of disabled people continued for many, many years.
Absolutely. In the States, where I went into hospital when I was 14, 13 for a couple of years, I ended up in the state mental institution, the lunatic asylum, effectively.
Wow.
In the early 60s. And just down the road from where we lived in Lynchburg was the Lynchburg Asylum. And that was basically disabled people or people who had learning difficulties, who were epileptic, etc. And they continued to forcibly sterilize them without informing anybody of what they were doing.
That's terrible.
Right up until the 70s. And it was only in the 70s that they started to depopulate this asylum. And it came to light because the doctors found, for one woman particularly, that she'd been sterilized. And she had no idea, the family had no idea. And so they started an inquiry, and it all started to come out. But this was not unusual. It's a republic, it's made up of federal states. So all over the country, this was happening. It wasn't unique to Virginia. And I think we tend to overlook that that perspective of people who are seen as faulty in some way by the wider society, but who are effectively, I think even to this day, basically incarcerated through drugs.
And I have to say, I mean, I think many people don't realise that the forced sterilizations and eugenics that the Nazis implemented started in America, I believe in Virginia. The Americans passed some of the most extreme eugenics rules of any country in the world, following the kind of, what's basically false science. We know that so much of eugenic science is now completely false, and yet people are still referring to it all of the time. But it wasn't the Nazis who decided to start purifying the human race, it was the Americans.
And the British.
But the British didn't have the same rules. I can't quote them, but I have researched them quite thoroughly in the past.
But the British, there were significant British politicians who ascribed to that, including Churchill. And I think, we tend to, again, with the passage of time and also the clouding of other issues that become more prominent, we tend to overlook what our role was in this. I mean, in a way, sort of looking at the Holocaust and how the death camps were set up, people in this country turned away. What was interesting, I was born soon after the war. I was born in 1947. And I can remember as a child, my grandparents used to get the newspapers delivered, and still the pictures were coming out. I grew up with those images, very much seared into my awareness
Yeah.
as awful, absolutely awful. And I'm glad I did. I think that was right. And I think it's important that the Holocaust Memorial Day continues, because
Yes.
everybody who's denying it, whatever, minimizing it in some way, you must never, never do that. I mean, it was an appalling thing to have happened to so many of us, disabled people, gay, travelers, and predominantly Jewish. Yes,
One
and
of
like
my
you say,
friends, sorry.
Well, I was going to say so many other groups, and of course, another group that were really targeted for sterilisation were people of colour. And again, there's very interesting stories on the Holocaust Memorial Day website. But we're talking about how, just as ourselves as individual kind of gay disabled people and Jewish disabled people, how it impacts on us. But I know in Scandinavia, there are still cases going on about forced sterilizations in the institutions from the 70s. Those cases are live at the moment. So, as allies, I think we should all remember those people don't have children to fight for them. And I think it's one of the reasons the story of disabled people has been so forgotten, because they haven't had those children to carry those memories on. And there's often been a sort of, well, our stories don't get told so much around the Holocaust. But actually, my perspective is if it wasn't for the Jewish people, our stories would have disappeared and vanished.
Absolutely.
They would have, we might have had to sort of fight a little bit to get full inclusion in ceremonies in places like the UK. But again, it's that sense of, well, if homosexuality is criminal, these people are criminal. It's that sense of the innocent victim, isn't it? And,
Yes,
somehow the disabled people are the legitimate victims because they should be institutionalized. And, really they're kind of defective. And the gay people, well, they're criminals. And somehow you've, and, oh, well, gypsies, they're criminals. And somehow you have this concept of innocent victim. But that's not coming from the victims of the Holocaust. That's coming from the outside world, and I feel that very, very strongly. But it's been, I think, so sobering with COVID. This time last year, we were talking to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust about launching a big project, and that would include people sending in selfies of themselves as disabled people, from all sorts of impairment groups, cultural groups, age groups, countries, and we would use them to stand for the 500,000 disabled people who died. But in fact, since then, more than 500,000 disabled people have died of COVID, and all we see is, oh, well, they had an underlying condition. We don't even see our government wearing black armbands, black ties. There's been no memorial services to date, despite huge numbers of people. There's still, well, it doesn't matter so much, but it really does.
Yes, of course.
And I think that sense of the sanctity of life that the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust promote is just so important. I mean, how have you felt, sitting there sort of watching the reporting, knowing that with all of us, we could be the next ones?
It's frightening. It's just a horrible, horrible time. And I'm very fortunate that I'm going to be vaccinated in the next couple of days. But a lot of the people that I know with disabilities, they haven't heard yet. And they're scared. They're so scared, people not leaving home. And, we know what the situation's like. And it's just, I don't want to use the word unprecedented because that's terrible and so overused, but it's something that we just never could have dreamed would happen in our lifetimes. And it's very hard coming to terms with it for everybody, but particularly people who've got any form of disability or illness and feel more vulnerable.
I was quite, I don't know, taken aback when they started shielding and had protections for us, because I think I was still expecting that we would just be abandoned. And of course, in reality, it was simply about kind of keeping the economy going and keeping the NHS going. And if there
Yes.
was a genuine concern about every single person's life, we wouldn't be in the state that we're in now. But that's one of the reasons we felt it was really important to have a show that looked at Holocaust Memorial Day in the context of 2021 and as disabled people with other intersectional identities as well, very often, because it is, I'm going to say, unprecedented. But certainly I felt that sort of sense of our lives matter less was definitely going to translate into less help. And I think in some ways it has. I mean, I'm very struck by the fact that, our dogs haven't had a single walk in more than 10 months. There are no volunteers queuing up to help people in the borough that's been hardest hit. That just isn't the case. Our council officers, the vast majority of whom don't live in the borough, know my situation. They know we've had no visitors, we haven't been out, we would die if we got COVID. They never ask how I am in any of these meetings. Not a word of concern is ever expressed. And you think, where is the kind of, where are their priorities? It does seem to be that kind of, yes, people's actual lives are just not having the importance that they should have.
Maybe they don't ask how you are because they don't want to hear the reality of it. Because then they'll feel like they need to do something.
Well, of course, I am talking about the senior commissioners who are responsible for doing everything. And, as an adult social care client, I'm very much, they should be doing something about me. And if you look at the government guidance from last September, there's all this kind of, you must write to all your direct payments users and you must express concern about them. And I had to write to the council and say, look, I'm looking at this correspondence, which doesn't express any concern at all. And do you know that legally you're supposed to express some concern? That's how desperate it actually gets.
Also, as a human, it's nice just to show some compassion.
Well, again, you would hope that everybody in charge, certainly, again, it's been a very historic week watching the inauguration and to see the values that we share, shared so publicly and, yes, firmly with the American public and the rest of the world, I think is the most positive thing that has happened for a long time. And with Holocaust Memorial Day, everybody's being asked to light candles. And again, I just think that's so important. I will be recommending, as always, with my health and safety hat on, that they're battery operated candles and not the real thing. The fire brigade and the emergency services have got quite enough to do. But I think that putting any kind of light in your window on Wednesday, the evening of Wednesday, the 27th, whether you're watching this show on the 27th, if you're watching it later, there's still something very symbolic about putting a light in the window. I lived for about 9 months when I was finishing my PhD in Newham in Cornwall, and it was very traditional to put a light in the window every single evening because the fleet would come in. That sort of old fishing tradition. And I think we need sort of lights to guide everybody home at the moment, don't we? I've got a light display on my gate, which is around sort of banners that say thank you key workers, and it's got solar lights, but I'm definitely going to be adding that battery operated candle into the window. And just thinking about all the people who died that we know about and all of the people we don't, because of course so many disabled people, gay people, people of colour, Roma people, and many more just vanished into history. No trace of them is left. And that's another reason that it's so important. And I think for me, as a disabled gay woman, it also makes me think about all of the people who are in care homes, because of course our community are much more likely to be living somewhere other than when we grew up. We're much less likely to have children or close family contact. Our friends are very often friends that we've made through community venues that we don't
Yes.
have access to at home. We're not used to having visitors at home very often, particularly older generations, because then that can out you and expose you. So for all of those reasons, people end up in social care.
Yes.
We know we're so overrepresented in care homes, and yet no records are being kept around sexual orientation and sexuality. There's no research into the impact if you have a relatives only visiting service. You know, it's just appalling to think about. So I don't just remember on the 27th and always the people who died in the Holocaust, but the people who are dying right now. So let's keep that light shining.
Can I draw your attention to an artist that I came across on Facebook that I just found was so powerful? It's a chap called Shahak Shapira, and he's taken photos of a Holocaust memorial in Berlin. It's called the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, and it's a huge area covered with what look like concrete gravestones and tombs. Go there and they take selfies, and they do gymnastic poses, and they use this as a ground for photographic work. And what he's done is he's superimposed the people over pictures of the concentration camps. And again, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this clearly, but that's a picture of somebody dancing on the tombs at the memorial. And he's superimposed it over these lifeless bodies.
That's very powerful.
It's a whole series of images, and it's so impactful.
And I think that's a really good place to end, is with art. So that link will be on our highlights and links page. I'm really looking forward to looking at that work, and we will also put up links to other artwork. We're going to be researching it in the time between recording this show and putting it out. So there will be a whole collection of links, including, of course, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. Thank you so much for talking to us and sharing, Renee.
Pleasure to be here with you on this important day.
And thank you for sharing your personal stories as well, Julie.
That's fine. Thank you.
This song is called Screw the Fascists. Keep hearing liars telling that the Holocaust was a fake. There's right-wing Nazis on the internet, and they're trying to indoctrinate. The world is full of xenophobes who love their nation states, and anally retentive homophobes who believe they're the master race. We gotta smash these fascist ideals and their politics of perfection. Gotta demonstrate how wrong they are through truth and misdirection. Don't be fooled into thinking we can challenge them with discretion. We've gotta take this hate and all that relates and silence their obsessions. There's hundreds of disabled people held prisoner behind closed doors, being beaten black and blue and being told that they're the cause. The government practices cleansing with politics that ensure that the rich stay rich and the white stay clean and the corridors of power stay pure. We've got to smash these fascist ideals and their politics of perfection. Got to demonstrate how wrong they are through truth and misdirection. Don't be fooled into thinking we can challenge them with discretion. We've got to take this hate and all that relates and silence these obsessions. Gotta believe that in ourselves we have the power to take control. We've gotta screw these fascists and their fantasies out every move, however small. We need freedom to act and freedom to be, for you to be you and me to be me, to ensure that our children have a destiny in sight when they'll all be free. We've got to screw these fascist morons and their ideals of perfection. Got to demonstrate how wrong they are through truth and misdirection. Don't be fooled into thinking we can challenge them with discretion. Gotta take this hate and all it relates and silence its obsession. We gotta smash these fascist ideals and their politics of perfection. Gotta demonstrate how wrong they are through truth and misdirection. But don't be fooled into thinking we can challenge him with discretion. We gotta take this hate and all that relates and silence these obsessions.